Hey, Pretty Girl Club. I want to talk about one of my kind of level up story times. And this is going to be a story about how I actually got into finance. A lot of you guys have asked me how I've been able to switch my career so many times, and I really did switch it quite a few times. So, at the time that I wanted to switch into finance, I was actually in my 20s. And at that time, I was working in, I guess you could call it health administration. So I had this rule to where no matter what city I was living in, I wanted to either work at some sort of healthcare facility, whether it was a hospital or some sort of like large clinic. You know how they have like these gigantic medical facilities where they have a whole bunch of clinics and stuff? One of the rules I made for myself was I want to get experience in companies that are really, really big. So, universities, medical centers, something where it's like you could easily switch departments and it's not like you have to quit the entire company if you don't like a certain thing. And the reason that I chose to work in medical centers for a little while in my 20s was because I knew that I may want to move at some point. So I was like, hey, no matter where I move, there's always going to be some sort of medical center in that city. And I knew that I liked living in the middle of the city. And so I was like, I'm going to get like a medical center type of job so that no matter where I move, I will always have transportation as well. So, depending on what region of the United States you live in, sometimes the weather can actually affect your transportation to where maybe you can't drive or maybe the traffic is really bad. So, part of the reason why I used medical centers as a part of my social climbing strategy was because I knew that hospitals and stuff, they're always going to have some sort of train, subway, bus, shuttle. They're always going to have a way for people to access it. And so I knew that, like, even if the weather is bad, let's say my car breaks down, let's say, I don't know, something happens and I just move and maybe I don't have as much money, maybe my car's in the shop, I will always be able to get to work. So, one problem that I had in the past, and I learned this because of being on my own, I've actually been living on my own since I was about, I don't know, maybe like 19 years old. And so I knew that depending on the location of my job, if the transportation was hard, if I had to get my car in the shop or something and take an Uber, that would be eating away at my money. So it's always been important to me to work at these really, really large medical facilities or maybe like a university as well, some sort of really big school, because once again, they're going to have lots of transportation sources that are getting you there, like public transportation. So just in case anything bad ever happens, I can still get to work. I don't have to pay for Ubers. I can just take a bus for a day or two and still get to those jobs. So that was my number one strategy, was to have jobs at either universities or medical centers, because those two things employ tens of thousands of people. Not to mention the fact that the bigger the company is and the more well known that company is, people are going to see that on your resume and they're more likely to hire you. That is something that I learned from switching jobs so many times. I noticed if I worked at some sort of really big place where people are like, oh, I have a family member that works there. Oh, I have a friend that works there. That's how they got their start. I just noticed that hiring managers, they were more impressed when I had these really big, well-known companies on my resume. So that was the reason why I had started off actually. Well, I didn't start off working in like medical facilities, but that was one of the strategies that I tried out and it ended up working for me. So when I worked at this really big medical facility, I actually was able to get experience doing different things. And that's because if I had too many basic betties, I would just apply to transfer to another department. So I know that's really petty, but like, let's say I was working somewhere and the women were really mean or something like that. I would just transfer somewhere else. Or maybe if they had another little clinic that was really close to where I lived, or they had like a sister hospital. Sometimes places they'll have like a sister hospital or like some sort of urgent care, or I don't know, those little clinics. And maybe it's closer to where you live. So I did that for a couple of years working in different healthcare facilities. And I got promoted, I think, 4 or 5 times. I don't know. However many years I worked there, I was actually able to get promoted faster because it's such a big company. There are always people going in and out of jobs. And by the way, I don't have a medical background. This was me working on the non-medical side of these facilities. So I did everything from receptionist types of jobs to kind of like admin assistant types of jobs to program coordinators. Like I worked my way up basically, and this is in my 20s. And so that's one way that I actually started off kind of social climbing, because I knew the bigger the company is, the less likely it is to be this horrible dead end job. Like if I'm working at a tiny place where there are only 5 positions, it's going to be very difficult for me to move up. I basically would have to leave the company, or I would have to completely switch careers. So I started off working at these medical facilities. And there was one audiology clinic that I worked in. Is that how you say it? I think I'm saying it right. So I worked in one little clinic in my 20s where they were dealing with people who were like deaf and stuff like that. And so one of the things that they had in that particular clinic was people could order hearing aids. They could like get batteries for hearing aids. Basically, I had to use QuickBooks. That's how I first came across QuickBooks. I was actually in my 20s just working one of those basic receptionist jobs. And I had to use QuickBooks, and then I had to enter in all of the information, like how much money did we make or whatever. So I didn't realize that I was technically starting off doing some sort of bookkeeping. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. And I only knew that that was important when I tried to apply for another department within this medical facility. Like this was at another clinic within the same really large medical center. And they were like, oh yeah, for this promotion, they really want people who are really good at QuickBooks and bookkeeping, because this job has more finance, like as a part of the actual job task. And so that was when I realized, oh, okay, so QuickBooks, that is something like that's a software that people really care about. And so when I was working these little receptionist jobs, you would think on the surface, like, oh, that's just a basic job. But it's like, no, it wasn't basic to me, because I actually started going behind the scenes and watching YouTube videos about QuickBooks and like what is bookkeeping? Why do people do bookkeeping? Like what's the point of doing it? Can you use these skills to get a better job? And another thing that I was doing at that time was anytime they tried to put a new task on me, first of all, I would get pissed off. But after I was done being pissed off, I would put that new software on my resume. So I would say like, okay, I know how to use QuickBooks. I know how to use this other software. I know how to use, I don't know, PeopleSoft, Epic. I'm thinking of a whole bunch of random softwares that I came across. There are so many other ones too, but I would put those on my resume. And then I started looking up online, what jobs can I apply to if I know how to use these particular softwares? And that is when I learned about finance, like QuickBooks and bookkeeping. That's starting to bring you into the gateway of finance. And so then I started to feel like, okay, this is not fair. Like I have so many more skills, but I am literally working as kind of like this admin assistant, and I could be transitioning into finance. So I started off actually applying for another job within kind of the medical administration field. It was still kind of in this health administrative type of field, and it was dealing with more of the financial side. So I ended up getting that job, and then they told me at that job, hey, we're hiring you and starting you off where you're getting paid more than the other workers, because in 5 years, we want you to be the manager. And so because you know how to use like QuickBooks and you have a little bit more knowledge than everybody else, we're going to put you in this position. So I stayed at that job for a couple of months, and not only did that actual job suck, but I remember I told my mom. So by the way that I actually first started off getting into the medical field was because I told you guys, my mother is very high up in the medical field. She's very well known in my hometown. She's very well respected. So it is technically nepotism. So my family actually, my mom, she's the one that got me in the door right after college when I wanted a job that was kind of in my field, but it's still paying more. And, I just wanted something that was very stable. So my mom actually did open the door for me to get those jobs, because you know how when you apply for the job, you can write down, if you know somebody there, they might ask you that on the application. So because I put my mom's name on there and she was very well known at this particular medical center, I was able to probably get into the job. Like that probably gave me a sense of privilege or something because I didn't really have much experience working in the medical field. But from there, I kind of bounced around to all these different jobs. And so I finally landed at this kind of business administrative type of role. And then I told my mom, like, yeah, they said that they were going to promote me in 5 years, or they want to promote me. And my mom actually told me, yeah, that doesn't really mean anything. A lot of jobs, they will tell you, hey, this job has room for growth. They will give you these empty promises like, oh, just stay here for 5 years and then we're going to make you the manager. That's what they told me. They wanted me to actually be the manager of all of the administrative people. And my mom was like, yeah, that's just a tactic that they're using so that you can like work there. And I was in my 20s, so I didn't really know anything about this. And so then I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to obviously get out of here within 5 years. By the way, that was about 4 years ago. So if I had not strategized, I would not have this YouTube channel. I would still be working at that same shitty job. So while I was there, I tried to learn as many softwares as I could. And like I said, I didn't like it, but I kept watching more YouTube videos about bookkeeping in particular. And I started looking up like, what is bookkeeping? How much does it pay? And I saw that it paid around the same as what I was getting paid at the time, but I didn't care about the pay to start off. Oh, and by the way, at this time I was also a housewife. So by the way, one thing that people don't tell you about this whole trad wife thing is depending on your lifestyle, you may get bored. Okay, so if you don't have some sort of business, at that time I didn't have a business yet. And so I eventually decided like I'm just going to get a job, some sort of part-time job or something, kind of build up my own money. And that's why I was working there. So I had started applying to different jobs as a bookkeeper, and I was getting some calls back, but I hadn't found another job yet. And also me and my ex at the time, we were planning on moving. So I knew that I would need to get a new job anyway because I wasn't going to be traveling all the way across the city, like over an hour away, just to keep this basic job. But I knew that I wanted to have my own money because I had been watching a lot of level up content. This is within the first year of me starting to watch kind of this level up style content and learning about how to have like your own money and stuff going for you, even if you are married. So I would say I was just starting to creep into my decentering men journey. Not quite, but I had just come across women like Shira 7. I had just became familiar with it. I was not familiar with her before because I was extremely religious. I was very devoutly religious, so I didn't watch anything that was non-Christian. I didn't watch any non-Christian content at all. It wasn't until I got out of Christianity that I started seeing everything on social media. So I was not active on Instagram. I did not have a YouTube account or anything like that. But anyway, once I came across the level up content, Shira was actually the first one that gave me the strategy of, no, you don't want to just be the wife. You don't want to just be cooking and cleaning. You want to also have your own money and like eventually start your own business. Don't just depend on his love for you and all that and God or whatever in order to have your livelihood. You want to start saving and just kind of building yourself up instead of revolving your life around like this man and the church and all that. So anyway, that was my strategy. Was I wanted to get my money up, and I was like, hey, working in finance, that is a sexy ass job. That is a sexy career. Okay. If I am able to like be pretty and also say that I work in finance, that just sounds hot to me. So I just felt like, oh my God, I will be so leveled up if I get a finance job. So around that time is when my mom's sister, she has a construction business. She has a small business. So for those of you who come from families where maybe you have a small business, if you have like a Hispanic background or I don't know, some sort of background where they have a family business, whether it's a restaurant, it could be whatever. My family, well, my aunt, she has a construction business and her business was starting to grow. So she started off as like a solopreneur. She would do cleaning. By the way, I have that in my background as well. I have been a hotel maid before. I have been a babysitter before. So I don't look down on any type of job. But my auntie, she started off being a basically like a maid, but she would clean offices. So kind of like, you know how they have maintenance guys like janitors and stuff. So, but she would clean offices and she owned a business basically. So her business started to really take off. And at first she was a solopreneur and then she ended up hiring other people and her business got big enough to the point where she was actually getting overwhelmed. So she couldn't do like all of the paperwork side, all of the like the tax stuff, the payroll side. And what happened with my auntie was people were coming in, they would try to scam her. Since then, people have actually tried to steal money from her because now her business is actually worth over $1 million. So unfortunately, I have had family members who have stolen money from my auntie, like tried to steal money from her business. So basically, she was at a point where she could not trust anybody to work for her. She could not trust anybody to deal with the finances because so many fucked up family members were like either stealing or they would just mess everything up. They couldn't care less about her business. And so even though I did not have any experience really with finance other than bookkeeping and, being a cashier, being a barista in college, I didn't have any experience. But she got so desperate to the point where she called her sister, my mom, and she was like, "Hey, what is Exoticals United doing right now? Like, is there any way that she could potentially help me, even if it's just part-time? I'm just desperate right now. I need somebody that I can trust, and I know that she doesn't really do anything that has to do with like finance or accounting and taxes and stuff, but I just need somebody that I can trust that is not going to F up the business." So because I had a history of being this devoutly religious Christian, I was the most religious person in my family, even though I have family members who are pastors. And that's another story right there. But I kind of had a reputation in my family of being the good girl. I was very like above board. I was very like on my P's and Q's in terms of morals and integrity and stuff. And because all of the other family members were kind of scammers and shit, my auntie, she really wanted me to help her. And she was like, "I'm willing to train you. Like, I'll teach you what to do. I will show you how to do this stuff. So like, don't worry." And so I actually took on a second job. So by the way, I did not have to take on this second job, but I chose to take it on because I just wanted to learn new skills. So I was doing my little regular business admin style job at the healthcare place. And then on the side, like maybe on the weekends for a couple of hours, I would help my aunt with her family business. So I started doing stuff like just basic administrative stuff. So putting people's names into a payroll system, maybe filing paperwork with the state. My aunt, her business owed money and taxes. By the way, if you want to be a business owner, that's something you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with taxes or paying taxes, owing taxes. I know that there are people that are able to get out of taxes. That's a whole other episode. But I started doing kind of this business admin stuff, and I noticed that she actually used QuickBooks. And so because she used QuickBooks, I was able to use that software again. And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I have experience with this." And she was like, "Yeah, what kind of stuff did you learn in college?" Another thing that happened was I was one of the few family members that finished college. I graduated college. I don't know if I'd be considered a first generation college student because Big Mama and them, they went to college. Well, my Big Mama went to college, and my mom went to college, but I just feel like if somebody goes to college as an adult, I don't know if that really counts. But anyway, I was the one who went to college right after high school, got my bachelor's and all that. I graduated on time. So she was asking me about my former experience, and she actually taught me some stuff about QuickBooks and kind of like the business side. I think I sent letters to people, or I don't remember if it was offer letters or something that had to do with employees. And it also got to the point to where my aunt, she needed help with doing the direct deposit. So I think I was either creating checks or I was like making the direct deposit go into their banks or something like that. So I was starting to dabble in finance a little bit more. And because the business was growing so fast, she actually asked me if I could quit the other job and just work for her full time. So at this point, I got scared because I was like, "Wait a minute. So you want me to quit my actual stable job, like my organized job, so I could work for a family member?" So I felt very like sketchy about that because I was like, I've never worked with a family member. I mean, I know you're my mom's sister, but it's like, I don't really know how this is going to work out. And then I was like, you do understand that I'd be quitting my job. And so like, please do not make this fall through. Like, "Oh, just kidding. I don't have a job for you." Because when you're dealing with business owners, when you have a business, it ebbs and flows. So sometimes you make a lot of money. Some months you make less money. So I knew that would be the case. And I didn't I don't know, I was just scared at first. And she was like, "Yes, I know that you're quitting your job. Like, I promise I'm not trying to lie to you or scam you or anything. Like, you will really be working for me every single day." And I was like, "Okay." So I quit the healthcare business job. I just walked out, by the way, and I don't regret it. So the way that I leave my jobs is depending on how the job treats me, that's how I'm going to treat them. So if they treated me with respect, I will quit the job respectfully. If they do not treat me with respect, then I will not treat them with respect when I leave the job. Okay, that's just how I do it. It has never hindered my career. It did not stop me from being successful. A lot of times when people tell you, "Oh, you need to put in your 2 weeks, you need to not burn bridges." No, bitch, I am the fucking bridge. How about them apples? I am the bridge. This is my life. It's my finances. I determine my future. I don't have to beg you for a paycheck. I don't have to beg my former job, especially people that were disrespectful and they're probably going to give me a bad reference anyway. Oh, absolutely not. You're definitely not going to get me to be your bitch. You got me all the way fucked up. Anyway, so the way that I leave jobs, it is completely dependent upon how they treated me. So if I feel like they're going to give me a bad reference anyway, or if I feel like I can't use them as a reference, I'm walking out of that bitch. And yes, I will still put their name on my resume. Oh, that's another way that I've been able to switch careers. So me, my mom, my aunt, my grandma, and my brothers, we all made a deal with each other that we can use each other as references. So, for example, anytime I would quit a job, like just walking out, I would say to my mom or somebody like, "Hey, can you be my reference for XYZ job?" So, I mean, I'm just being completely honest. This is what a lot of people do, and they won't tell you this, especially if you don't have any friends or family. I'm telling you, this is what people are doing in the non-Black communities. I'm just being 100% honest. So, this is a part of my background as well. So, we all made a deal with each other within the family that we are going to be each other's references. So if something goes bad with your job, just tell me what company you want me to pretend that I'm the manager for. And then, I can create a fake number if I need to using the Text Now app. And then they can call my phone number. And then I will be your reference if I need to. I know that some of you guys in my Discord have actually asked me to be your reference. Like I've done that for people in the Discord before. So that's another social climbing tactic. Always having positive relationships. This is why I tell you guys to decenter men. Stop worrying about crazy ass men that are going to abandon you. Spend your time investing in positive female friendships, positive family relationships, because these are the types of people that will be your reference if you need them to. Like if something gets screwed up with your job and you need them to like basically pretend, then guess what? You can call on your girls for that. You can call on your true friends or your sister or cousin or whoever you trust. But when it comes to some crazy ass, cheating ass, lying ass man, no, because you may have broken up with him by the time you're about to get a new job. By the way, please join the Patreon because that's a part of like what we talk about in there. A lot of girls have helped each other in terms of like career advice and stuff. So yeah, make sure that you join the Patreon. But that is one of the deals that we've always had with each other, which is we are going to be each other's references. So anyway, I left that bad job where they had ended up yelling at me and stuff. That's the reason that I left it, like without putting in a 2 weeks, because I actually was going to put in the 2 weeks, but then this one girl decided to randomly yell at me in front of everybody. Like I'm talking yelling in the front office in front of all the other employees. So then I literally walked out at lunch. So I went to my lunch break and then they never saw me again, except for when I think I came back to pick up a paycheck or they mailed it. I don't even remember. But basically, I never worked there again. And I don't regret it because as long as you have people that are going to be your references and they agree to basically lie for you, then you're going to be fine. Okay. So I'm just giving you the tea. So I just walked out of that job so that I could work for my auntie. And with working for her, I worked for her for about 6 months. So I ended up getting another job about 6 months later because working with family, there are going to be some difficulties. So I do feel like with my aunt, the downside is that there are no boundaries really. Like there weren't a lot of boundaries. We would be texting sometimes at like 2 a.m. But I was also in my 20s, so I feel like I was not as good yet at setting boundaries too. So yeah, I worked with her for about 6 months, and every time I learned a new software, whether it was QuickBooks, anytime I turned in some paperwork to the state, I put that on my resume. I said, I turned in paperwork to the state, tax paperwork or reports about labor hours or whatever. And that started to look very impressive on my resume. So then I was like, let me see if I can take my family business job and use this to apply for a real life finance job, like outside of like my family. Let me see if somebody will actually hire me as an actual finance person. It didn't matter what finance job I got. At that time, I did not want to be an accountant because I didn't think that I could be an accountant. I just wanted to be maybe a finance assistant. Maybe I could get into accounts payable or accounts receivable. So that's what I applied for. And I ended up getting a job offer at a Christian school. So this local Christian school, they saw my resume and they offered me a job as a finance coordinator. That was the title of the job. And the reason that they offered me the job, in my opinion, actually had to do with me being married. I know this sounds very biased, but the only reason I'm saying that is because when I went into the interview, I had on my blazer. I kind of looked older at that time, so I had on my blazer. I was not quite as thin. I wasn't as skinny and small as I am now, so I just feel like I looked older. I had on a wedding ring, and the guy that interviewed me, he was a white guy, and then the other guy that interviewed me was a Hispanic guy. So for those of you who know my racial background, if you were to look at my DNA, my background is black, white, Hispanic. So guess what? I sure did bring that shit up in the interview. And the way that I brought that up was because they asked, why do you specifically want to work at a Christian school? Why do you specifically want to work in this type of environment? And then I said, oh, I come from an underprivileged multiracial family. My background is black, white, Hispanic, and I would not be where I am today if it weren't for the Christian community helping my family out. So I had all my answers lined up perfectly, and I ended up getting hired. They did ask me some technical questions, though. Oh, another thing I forgot to say. I cheated. Well, I didn't really cheat, but this is a cheat code for interviews. So before I came in to the interview, I looked up information about who the guy is, who these hiring managers are. I looked up information about the position, what does a finance coordinator do? And then when they were emailing me back and forth, they kind of warned me that they would be asking me some technical questions. So I actually got my notebook and I wrote down a whole bunch of notes on different tax percentages and stuff. I think I wrote down notes about FICA, and I don't even remember all the terminologies, but I had a whole notepad full of notes right in front of me, right underneath my resume. So I actually came into the interview with my open notebook full of notes. I don't know to this day if they noticed that I had notes or not, but that is something that has helped me to land, I think, 2 or 3 different finance jobs. So when he asked me a question oh, what is the tax rate, or what types of deductions do you take out of the paycheck? I had it right there in front of me on my notes. And so I would think in the middle of the interview, I'd be like, I think you would take out federal, state, and income taxes, FICA taxes, wage garnishments. And so from their perspective, it looked like I really knew what I was talking about. So like I said, I don't know if they saw me with the notes, but either way, even if the interviewer does see that you have notes, guess what? That shows that you are prepared. That shows that you're very well studied. This shows that you're taking it seriously because you took the time to prepare a whole bunch of finance notes before you came into the interview. So when I went there and did the interview, I passed the interview basically, and then they gave me a tour of the school. So I was thinking, okay, yeah, I probably got this job. And I actually did end up getting offered the job as a financial coordinator. It was not a high paying job. Well, it depends on what you think is high paying and what you think is not. It paid $46,000. So I do not consider that to be high paying. But for some of you, depending on your age and your location, you may think that that's high paying. So for me, I didn't really care because guess what? I just transferred into a fucking finance job, baby. So I was super excited. But the reason that I think that I could have been hired based on other factors was also because I mentioned my background that I had in common with them. I was also very friendly with them. So I did do a good job at answering the questions. But also Tom, that was the guy who hired me, he was like, oh, I couldn't ask you this during the interview because it's illegal, but do you have a family? Do you have any kids or anything like that? And not only is that an inappropriate question, but the only way that he would have asked me that would have been him looking at my wedding ring or something like that. So looking back, I mean, him saying that, I feel like part of the reason he hired me was maybe because he could kind of relate to me. He was a very, very old white man. He was like a boomer. So I feel like him being a family man and him perceiving me as a family woman because I wore my wedding ring or whatever, even though I was literally on track to get a divorce. But I wore my wedding ring to the interview because I wanted to be taken seriously. So one of the negative things about maybe having pretty privilege or looking young is that you're not taken seriously. So I have strategically worn my wedding ring in the past. So I actually still have it to this day. I haven't needed to wear it, so I just keep it in my drawer. But strategically, I have dressed older sometimes or worn my hair in a way to try to make myself look older. Or I have like purposely dressed frumpy sometimes to try to make myself look more quote unquote mature. So I feel like the actual wedding ring and him low key admitting that he couldn't ask me about my family and stuff because it's illegal, I feel like he was biased in hiring me because he thought that I was some married Christian family woman, which is how I came off in the interview. I didn't say that I have kids because I don't have kids, but him saying that, it makes me feel like he was choosing me based on other factors besides my qualifications. Because, by the way, I don't have a finance degree. There are some people who lie about their degrees, which I will never shame you for, because guess what? The jobs lie about how the job is going to be. The United States lies to you all the time. People are lying to you 24/7. Oh, this is a great company to work for. Lies. Oh, I'm such a nice boss. I'm a cool boss. Lies. Oh, you're going to have a great time working here. Lies. So, depending on however you want a social climb, that's your personal business. Go and get your bags, go and get your money, do what you have to do to support yourself and your family. So with that job, actually, that was my first finance job. That ended up being the job that carried me through when I ended up getting a separation, getting a divorce, getting a whole new apartment. Because I had a job in finance, that actually helped me to level up and social climb even more. And so what happened with that finance coordinator job, so the guy that hired me, he was actually the staff accountant. And this was the old guy that was a boomer. So he had some issues, kind of like, I won't say he had dementia, but he was overwhelmed. I'll just say that. He was overwhelmed. He would kind of forget about certain tasks. That's fine. He started pushing his work off onto me. And so if I'm an entry-level finance coordinator, and he is a staff accountant and he's pushing off accounting tasks onto me, I started getting pissed off. And so I was like, okay, so if I'm going to be doing the work of an accountant, I'm going to be getting paid as an accountant. And so every time he would have me like printing checks or doing whatever the accountants normally do, I started putting all those things on my resume. Okay, I know how to print checks. Like I would put a little bullet point, I would put a new line in my resume. Printed checks or created checks in QuickBooks and printed them out for contractors. Like I would put all sorts of stuff, whatever he was pushing off onto me, I would always put that on my resume. And then from there, I was able to transition and I applied for another finance coordinator position. So I was, like I said, I was trying to apply for anything within finance. And at that time, I realized, okay, I guess I can be an accountant because I'm doing the exact same job. And I'm doing like the journals or whatever, or I don't remember all the things I did. I think I did like journals, I did write-offs, I did check printing, I did some accounts receivable, just anything you can think of with finance. And so I put all of those things on my resume, and then I started applying to any finance job that popped up on Indeed, especially if it was some sort of nonprofit or another Christian school or something like that. So at that time, I knew that I did not want to work at a smaller company. I knew that I wanted to work at a big, large place, maybe like some sort of medical center, some sort of university or something where they have thousands of jobs there. So that's thousands of opportunities to get hired and promoted. So I ended up getting another job offer as a financial coordinator again, but this time it paid a little bit more than the current one that I was at. And also, after about, I don't remember how many months I worked there, I noticed I had a habit, by the way. This is how I knew that I was supposed to like work for myself, because I had a habit of getting tired or fed up with my current job. No matter how good the job was, I would get tired or fed up after about 6 or 7 months. Then I would start applying to another job. So, yes, it helped me to switch careers a lot. It helped me to kind of get promoted a lot and have a lot of different experiences. But I eventually realized I think I want to work for myself. I think that's what it is deep down inside, because I realized I didn't have a dream job. My dream job was really, first of all, I didn't even believe in a dream job until this. I didn't think that dream jobs existed. I thought that a dream job is just like a fake thing that people talk about. But it turns out my dream job was working for myself. It was doing something where I'm my own boss, where I get to create my own schedule, and something where I could like make money online or make money from my bed, make money while I'm sleeping. That was my version of a dream job. But I ended up getting this other financial coordinator job, and that job also went well. That one was a little bit more advanced than the previous one. And then from there, I applied to a job as a staff accountant. This was my first entry-level staff accountant job, and I got that job at one of the biggest companies in my city. And actually, the staff accountant job that I got, it was actually at this really big university, and the hiring manager was a black male. Okay, so for those of you who hate black people, that's not going to work, because you never know if like you're in a job setting and somebody could potentially give you an opportunity. So basically what happened when I got my first accountant job was, this was actually during COVID time. So this is when people were doing Zoom interviews and stuff. So I had this Zoom interview. So it was so crazy, because after I had my second finance coordinator job, I applied for so many jobs. I actually got 4 job offers in the finance field, because I had been writing down all of these different little tiny tasks that they had been assigning me in these finance jobs. Every time the manager pushed something off onto me, oh, guess what? I'm going to profit off that shit. You got me doing journals. You got me balancing the books. You got me doing accounts payable, accounts receivable. You got me organizing stuff with vendors or using all of these other softwares. By that time, I had learned other softwares besides QuickBooks. I can't remember the names of all the softwares, but I had learned like ADP, which is like a payroll software. I had started doing more payroll stuff at some of these different jobs. I don't even remember all the stuff that I did, but I basically had done payroll. I had done accounts payable, accounts receivable, check printing, just all kinds of stuff. So at that point, my resume was getting really long, and it was getting really like impressive, I guess. And then for those of you who want to put something on your resume and maybe you're ashamed of the fact that you only worked there for 7 months, just change it to 1 year. Just say, I worked there from 2022 to 2023, or I worked there from 2021 to 2023. If they call your job, if they call the old job, first of all, you're supposed to give them the phone number of your friend or family member and then tell them, hey, pretend your name is such and such, and, pretend that you were my manager and say that I worked there from this year to that year. But let's say they somehow circumvent that. Usually they don't, by the way. I used to work in HR. I used to be a hiring manager, actually. I used to be the one calling the references. And I can tell you, I have never, not once, met any hiring manager that actually calls a big ass company and then they try to get all of your HR information. Not at a low level job that's only $40,000. Are you kidding me? You think they're going to spend that much time for a job that's only $40,000? Or for an entry-level job? Maybe if you're a CEO, maybe if you're a CFO, maybe if you're a VP, or if you're doing something that's more high stakes, if you're at the doctoral level or something, maybe a higher level professional. But for an entry-level, basic-ass job that they don't give a fuck about, no, they're not going to do that. I'm just being honest. And if they do, and if they come back to you and say, hey, you said you worked here from 2021 to 2023, but when I called them, they said it was 2022 to 2023. All you have to say is, oh, that's inaccurate. They had a data entry error. That's not correct. I worked there from 2021 to 2023. Would you like me to show you some pay stubs to prove that, or bank statements or something to prove that I worked there longer? They're not going to say yes. Usually they're going to be like, oh, no, it's not a big deal, whatever. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm being 100% honest as a person who comes from a whole bunch of people that have been ruthless capitalists. This is the type of stuff that happens behind the scenes. Stop playing fair in an unfair world. This is the type of stuff that happens behind the scenes. They're telling you, oh, you have to always put in your 2 weeks. You have to always be nice to everybody, always be the good girl. Of course, they're telling you that because they want you to be at the bottom. They want you to stay in your place, especially if you're a person of color. Stay in your place is the mindset of a lot of people. So the way that I see it is, if I can do the job, like if the person can do the job, or if the person is willing to learn how to do the job, then they're qualified for the job. That's it. Because I don't like how people are super biased, like, oh, you're not educated enough, you're not white enough, you're not this enough. And it's like, okay, yes, I totally understand, especially if you're a doctor or a neurosurgeon. Of course, like I want you to have lots of education, lots of experience. But some people, they won't give you the experience without the experience, and that is not fair. And so the way that a lot of people have gotten past that, at least from my background in my hometown, that's how they get past that, okay? They ask their friends or family members to be their references for them. They will, maybe if they work there a short time, they will say that they work there for a longer time. Some people will straight up, did you know that I've actually heard of one guy, he actually became a marketing VP. He had a totally fake, he had a fake degree on there. He had everything fake. And to this day, he's doing fine. Like I've met so many people where they put fake degrees on their resumes. They put fake references, fake work tasks. And by the way, you know how people say honesty is the best policy? They'll tell you on the one hand that honesty is the best policy, but then 5 seconds later, they're going to say, oh, you got to sell yourself. You got to make yourself look good. Okay, selling yourself really means exaggerating your accomplishments. It means exaggerating your experience. So which one is it? Do you want me to sell myself and like make myself look like I'm a CEO? Or do you want me to say, oh yeah, I'm actually not that great at accounting. I'm only planning on staying here for the next 6 months. Then I'm going to quit. Which one is it? Is honesty the best policy, or is selling yourself the best policy? So by the way, this is up to you how far you want to go with this. I'm not trying to encourage you to do anything. I'm not even an advice channel or anything. I'm just telling you what I've seen and experienced. This is the world that we live in. We don't live in a utopian society. I also worked at a place where they had therapists there. It was like this mental health clinic. There was a therapist that didn't even have a degree in, doing therapy. She didn't even have like a psychology background or anything. But because she was well-spoken and knowledgeable, she was able to become a therapist and actually was working there. She was not black or anything. She was not a person of color. She was like this white girl. So people are out here doing what they have to do so that they can get their money. Like I said, I'm not telling you to do this, but I'm just being honest. So anyway, the way that I got my accounting job was I put every little task on my resume, even if I only did that thing one time. So even if I only printed a check one time, even if I only deposited, $10,000 or something one time, guess what? I am putting that in there. Deposited money of amounts up to $10,000. I would put that on my resume. And then with my first accounting job, it was a Zoom interview, and this was with a black man. He was the executive director, a Hispanic guy he was going to be my trainer, like the accountant, and then with a white woman who was like the assistant executive director. So guess what my background is? Black, white, Hispanic. So guess what? When they said, why do you want to work at a place like this? I did the same story. Well, I came from an underprivileged multiracial background of black, white, and Hispanic, and if it weren't for universities and medical centers like this one, my mom works in the medical field, or my grandmother, she worked at a university. Like I would find a way to tie in not only my racial background, especially if the people interviewing me are of that background. Oh, hell yeah. So I would tie that in. As a matter of fact, all 4 of the finance jobs that I got, the interviewing people, like the hiring managers, they were either black, white, or Hispanic. They just happened to be all of those things, including the most recent job that I actually left. And I did the same exact paragraph. I had the same exact explanation for all 4 of the jobs that I ended up working in finance. And then for that job as an accountant, he was asking me technical questions as well. So I knew that interviewing to be an accountant, he was going to ask probably harder questions. So at that time, I interviewed for, I think, 1 or 2 staff accountant jobs. And then I interviewed for multiple like finance coordinator jobs. And I think I interviewed for some sort of payroll coordinator or something like that. Something that had to do with like payroll. And so I actually ended up getting 4 job offers. And it's so funny because so there was this one Zoom interview that I did, and the girl who interviewed me, she was this Asian girl. She looked like she was my age. And I had just moved to the city that I'm living in now. And it's hilarious because my apartment was completely empty, but I needed to do this Zoom interview. So I was like, I'm not going to allow an empty apartment to stop me from interviewing for jobs. And so I remember I logged on to the Zoom and I didn't know how to put the background. You know how you can put a background on there so it doesn't show where you're at? So I didn't have time to put on the background. And she mentioned during the interview, she was like, you look like you're sitting on the floor in an empty apartment. And I was like, yeah, actually I am. I just moved here. So I laughed it off. I explained, yeah, I just moved here. I'm just looking for opportunities and stuff. I'm really hungry. I'm really ready to learn. I really am passionate about accounting. So when it was a girl who could not relate to me in terms of her racial background, I used another form of relatability. I said, I'm really hungry and I really want to learn about accounting. And yes, I am sitting on the floor, but I'm very dedicated to getting a job. And I didn't want to let my empty apartment stop me from coming on and talking with you because I really want to work at this company. So I would find a way to finesse that shit. And I actually did end up getting that job offer with that particular girl. And I declined that offer, and she actually got pissed off like when I declined that offer. But anyway, the first staff accountant job that I got, the manager was a black male. So if I would have had that attitude of, oh, I don't want to work for someone that's like black, then I wouldn't have actually got into accounting because he was actually older. And later on, he actually told me that my phenotype, he didn't use the word phenotype, but he said that I reminded him of his wife and daughter. And he never did anything creepy to me. So he wasn't trying to like hit on me or anything. I don't know, maybe he was creepy, but if he was, he didn't do anything creepy. But after I got hired, he did tell me that. He said, when I first met you or when I talked to you on the Zoom interview, you seemed very enthusiastic and you remind me of like my wife or my daughter. So because I looked like his family members and because I was enthusiastic, he said that I seemed like I would be a really good team player. And another thing that I told him as well, when I first got that job, I was nervous because it was my first time being an accountant and I was working at the biggest company in my city or like one of the biggest employers in my city. So I told him, I was like, hey, just so you know, like, has there been some sort of mistake? I mean, I remember I was so shocked that I actually got this job that I literally went to him and I was like, hey, there might have been a mistake with my application. I think it said that I had this much experience when in reality, I only have a few years of experience. So I'm just letting you know that. So I actually was very honest with him. And this was the older black guy. And he was like, oh, that's no problem at all. I only have a degree in economics. And, I still made it here, like being this executive, I still made it to this executive level. So no worries, like I'm learning just like you. So he was actually very understanding. So vulnerability and transparency is something that has really helped me to get my foot in the door with these jobs that I've always wanted. But yeah, so once I became an accountant, that was basically how I did it, was kind of stepping my way up. By the way, becoming an accountant, it actually changed my dating life as well. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to have to make another episode about that. But yeah, that is my social climbing story of how I got into the accounting field. And then once I got the job, I started going to all of these networking events. I learned everything I could about finance and accounting, anything that had to do with money. I started learning about it. But what do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.